Welcome to 𝗶𝘀𝘁𝘁, Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, 𝗪𝗫𝘊.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another engaging, informative, and always entertaining episode of 𝗶𝘀𝘁𝘁's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. I'm your host, 𝗪𝗫𝘊. I'm excited to have Doug with us today. Doug, thanks for joining us.
Michael, it's a pleasure to be with you today. Always fun to talk to you.
It's always great. It's always great. Hey, friends, we know that you can do what only you can do, and that is hit that subscribe and like button because Doug's feelings count here. Doug likes to be liked. Make sure to like that episode. But Doug, everybody would love to know, were you born this way or how'd you get into the appraisal and valuation profession?
How did I get into the profession? My dad was an appraiser.
Oh, wow.
I'm an appraiser
Okay.
because Dad saved my bacon and said, come work for me till you figure out what you want to do. 45 years later, here I still am. The only difference between a rut and a grave is the depth. But I have indeed found the profession to be interesting.
Mhm.
It has at least provided enough of a paycheck to get me where I am today.
Holy smokes. Were you like Alan Hummel? You were just born at the other end of the tape measure, or how did that go?
Oh, I don't know. My dad wanted to see me become a professional musician.
Oh, wow.
But I came to realize he paid for the school, but I came to realize that to really get where I wanted to go was going to be too hard and too difficult. And I needed to do something different. And he said, come work for me for a while. You figure it out. And the bug bit, and here I am.
Holy smokes. So you went to school for
A conservatory.
A conservatory. So you didn't just play some music. You applied and got accepted to a top-notch program, and then you finished the program.
I did, luckily. I survived.
And then you didn't join an orchestra or symphony. And,
No, I was a pianist. I was a pianist, which means there are very few piano slots in an orchestra, maybe one.
Yeah.
And most of them don't pay very well.
That's definitely the case.
No,
Oh my goodness. In order to put bacon on your plate, you needed some bacon. And
most of us do.
And Dad was the pathway to help you get there.
He was an MAI. And he fell into the business. He fell into the business in the 1950s.
Oh, wow.
40s,
Okay.
50s, when the Institute was not even 20 years old. And the profession wasn't just 20 years old. And he was a journalist and a newspaper guy.
Oh, wow.
He was selling real estate. And then he came to realize that this new thing called appraising is kind of like investigative reporting. And you talk to people, you go hunting up for information, you compile a thread, you write it up, and it's kind of like writing a piece of news copy in a way. And then in those days, it was a lot easier to become an MAI than it is today. In fact, when he wrote his demo in the 1950s, he told me directly that if you didn't have a sale that would help you prove a particular point that was required in the demo, you could make up a comp out of whole cloth just so you were clear that this is a demonstration. It's like the appraisal equivalent of phone a friend. And,
oh my gosh.
And you could make up a comp and say, now this comp has XYZ feature, and I'm using that to demonstrate how to manipulate a fact as a valuation point. That's really I swear, Your Honor. So obviously that's not the case for appraisers today who have to sweat bullets.
Oh my gosh.
And that can be very hard. It certainly the desire to do a really great job on my demo took me years longer than I should have taken. I should have just.
It sounds like your dad had the early version of ChatGPT that could just make up data for you on demand.
You could, yes. And my only experience with ChatGPT regularly is ChatGPT promises a lot and delivers a lot less. And so I love it, and it can be very useful as a bouncing off idea. But if you ask it to do some kind of significant computational work, you're probably going to take it's going to be a hard drop because you have to do you still have to do a lot of work. Automation being what it is.
So you get the opportunity to come into the profession with your dad being a designated member.
He was.
Was he primarily focused on commercial, or was he primarily doing residential and also had his MAI?
He was doing both.
Yeah.
And back in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s, there was still a lot of, and definitely in the 80s, there was still a lot of residential placement to small banks. The secondary market system was growing in its intensity, but nowhere near where it went after the 1990s. Nowhere near.
So how did that open up the door for you? Because I gather you and I spent a decent bit of time together.
Yeah.
You're primarily residential in your...
No, commercial. Primarily commercial.
Primarily commercial. I know you and I talk about all your residential.
It's because of restorative competitive value. But no, I worked for Dad through my 20s, got hooked into a gig with the State Tax Commission in Missouri to do sample valuation processes. Missouri uses an appraisal ratio study rather than a sales ratio study for setting tax equalization, because Missouri is a non-recording state. And then that led for me to becoming involved in economic development with a development corporation, the public entity in St. Louis City, and did that for 3 years. And then a job at a bank opened up, and I took the job at Commerce Bank and worked there for 27 years and developed a lot of theories and a lot of programs for the bank. And they've all worked very successfully there. Validation was the most significant breakthrough that really made a lot of difference for them. But in the meantime, I was active with the Institute and was government relations for 10 years, chair for 4 of those. And that's when restorative competitive value came into my parlance, because I was seeing over the curvature of the earth kind of horizon view of issues and could formulate some suggestions that won the Brookings Award in 2022.
That's not an insignificant accomplishment, Doug. Has anybody else in the industry won the Brookings Award?
Well,
I don't think so.
Very candidly, very few people in the industry even submitted a proposal. And that's a marker of the fact that the profession as a whole hasn't yet been able to grasp where you can go with this. And it's a piece of what might be argued as the profession, both in the commercial and the resi, are stuck with what appears to be a static body of knowledge that really is not expanding in any meaningful way, which is a problem. And certainly RCV is one tool to help rectify those issues in areas that are not actively marketing. And validation is an area that would, if we could help work the foundations thinking about significant actions as an appraiser, would open up for appraisers a whole new line of business, assisting banks with not valuations, but processes to prove the ongoing reliability of existing reports in their file. Which
anybody who spent any amount of time around commercial totally understands that. But before we can even get to that point, you do, of course, know this, but not everyone else does. The career path that you've had is one, as so many of our guests experience, quite unique. And so you get that opportunity to go and work with your dad first, who happened to be a designated member. Your time primarily was commercial. And then what had you leave working with Pops?
Well, Dad retired. I wasn't yet licensing didn't exist yet. Dad had to retire. His health was failing.
Oh, got it.
I was trying to hold it together myself for a couple of years and kept thinking, I need a job with benefits. I have kids. I got a kid with medical problems. I need a little help here. And then, the job with the State Tax Commission opened up. And then I thought I didn't even get the job. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, they called me back and said, hey, we still need to talk about this gig. Would you still be willing to do it? And at
Oh,
that
wow.
point, I was kind of like, yes, hire me. And I did. And I got in the job, and I worked at it for a year. And then the city was like so impressed with what I was doing, because they had created a recording ordinance inside the city, but they hadn't done anything with the data. They had a stack yay high of sheets of sales. And I said,
Yeah.
can I just take those and put those in a spreadsheet for myself?
Oh
And
my
they
God.
said, yeah. And so I did that. And they said, can we get a copy? And I said, yeah, I'll give you a copy. What the heck? And then the development corporation calls up and says, hey, we think we could use you over here. And within a year of that, or a year and a half of that, I was writing tax incremental financing bonding analysis for them. So I did some
No
really
kidding.
interesting things, really wild stuff.
Yeah. Most people don't, I say most, a lot of our listeners are commercial, but even those that are commercial don't necessarily have a strong sense of TIF districts. And a lot of residential appraisers have no idea what that is. You want to take a quick description, take a moment.
This is before Excel, folks.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're talking to a guy who back in his late 20s was like afraid of touching a computer for fear of it blowing up. And I found a book called Easy as 1, 2, 3, and it was Lotus 1, 2, 3.
I was going to say Lotus 1, 2, 3 is probably what you need.
And it walked you in, and it said, now here's the on button, and you push this button like that, and you slip in a 5.5-inch floppy disk. And you're going to see a little thing flashing on the screen.
Mhm.
And it showed me how to create, how to work in Lotus 1, 2, 3. And within 3 weeks, I was writing discounted cash flow. Boom, I was moving. And then I developed an affinity for a more powerful program called Quattro.
Quattro Pro. Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir, that is correct. And Quattro was really the superior program by far. And Microsoft was looking over from the side and saying, hey, they got this multi-sheet thing they're doing. And Microsoft took that concept and turned it into Excel as tabs on a single spread. Well, Quattro had a loading sheet and then individual spreadsheets that referenced across.
Yeah.
But it allowed me to do all of the 10 sub-bonding districts that occur in tax incremental financing and create a bonding analysis, because I reverse engineered the one that was given to the city by the corporate counsel and the accounting firm. I just reversed it and figured out how they did what they did. And from there, it was pretty easy, really.
I mean, that's just...
Sachs actually took my work and said, we'll start with this. So I thought, hey, that's pretty cool.
Doug, that is quite cool. I mean, not everybody goes to a conservatory and then goes to work for dad and then ends up writing tax increment.
You try to play Chopin and tell me what's harder. So,
oh my goodness. So for those that may not know what tax increment funding is, you want to just share that for just a minute or two?
So you got a project, and it's like an appraisal. It's like a house appraisal. It's like a shopping center appraisal. You're going to have a value as is and a value after stabilization or after it's finished. What happens if the costs are higher than the projected value because you're trying to do this in an area that needs economic development? And so what you can do is you can say, what if we diverted some of the real estate tax growth towards paying off a bond that makes up that, use a bond to fund the gap, and use the tax revenues, the increments in taxes that above and beyond what they're generating today, real estate tax, sales tax, utility tax, employment tax, sales tax, and so on. And there's 9 or 10 of them. And say, look, let's whisk some of that off to pay the bond back. We get this big lump of cash out of a bonding agency, Goldman Sachs, whatever.
Yep.
And use that to right-size the project and make it feasible. And then everybody said, hey, that's great. And then the edge suburb said, oh, we're hurting too. We need tax incremental financing for these brand new shiny shopping centers. So it wicked away the restorative aspect of that. But that's what I did. And that was tax increment financing.
Got it. And how long were you in the tax increment space before that
Well,
evolved into your next career opportunity?
Development Core was 3 years, and I was doing everything from marketing property to selling property to buying property, doing kind of funky analysis work. TI were part of that. And then this job, but I hadn't gotten a pay raise because it's a city and it's budget strapped. And I had kids going to high school at this point, and I said,
Yep.
so I need more money to be able to pay for these high schools.
Those things matter.
They do. And I saw an ad in the paper for a job at a bank, and I said, I know the guy. I'll call him and ask what's up. And when I called the number, I got a guy answer. I said, I'm looking for Mark. And they said, he's no longer here.
Oh,
And I said, oh, so this is his job. And yes, it was. And it took a little while to get there because my bank is a great bank. My bank is the only bank in the country that I know of that did not take Toxic Asset Relief Program funds in after 2008.
really?
Zero.
Wow, that's impressive.
Only Commerce and Ford.
Yep.
Motor. Yes. That's it.
Amazing.
It is. But that's how well the bank operated its business. And doesn't grow fast.
Yep.
Doesn't grow fast, but it's a tremendously stable bank. And so, yes, it was. And they hired me in. And of course, they said, we'd like you to do environmental too. Would you do environmental work for us? And I said, they said, have you read a phase 1 ever? And I said, yeah, a few, which was kind of like, not. But I'd seen the report sitting on the environmental engineer's desk, and I might have heard him talk about stuff.
Sure.
But when I walked in, there were 25 sitting on the desk. And I kind of went, what have I done?
Yeah.
But you learn by doing, and I learned a lot, and I became pretty good at talking shop with environmental guys and figuring out a way to fix deals, because the longer we live on the surface of the earth, the more we make a mess of it. And so you're going to have a lot of areas that have some kind of surprise issue. But what are you going to do? You're going to say, no, we can't make the loan until it gets fixed.
Yeah,
People
sure.
buy houses all the time with old furnaces.
Yes.
That needs a repair. So can't you figure out a way to recognize the potential costs of whatever you need to do? So I developed mechanisms for that. It was just deal mechanisms. And I used that at the bank very successfully for a very long time.
Oh my goodness. That's absolutely amazing. And then you mentioned that bank being one of the few that didn't take the relief.
Yeah.
How did that influence the role that you had? So you had a particular role for the bank, a very strategic choice in what they would and would not do. And therefore that dictated the type of lending that they did and did not do. How did that evolve your role there with that bank?
Oh, by that point, my role had been pretty well locked in. We had begun to grow the department into a much larger department. We were only about 5 people back then, but by the time 2011 comes around, we were probably more like about 13. And we went from just handling the major silos, geographic silos, to sort of running the program coast to coast.
Oh, okay.
And my bank doesn't have a national presence at that size. It's still a top 50 bank, but its trust department, who operates at a different level entirely, top 15 trust department, wealth management. And we had members scattered around the country and handling not the resi portfolio, except for where residences were kicked into the side of a commercial deal, and a mortgage company that did its own thing off to the side, their own business. But we did a lot of residential. We did a tremendous amount of subdivision analysis. We did a tremendous amount of industrial, commercial, retail, income producing, a lot of nonprofit stuff. It was busy. We would produce, I think we were documenting about 5,000 deals a year.
Oh, wow.
Total portfolio value, maybe 5 to 7 billion a year. I looked at probably 2 to 3 billion of those in terms of just reviewing the work and making sure that it seemed to fit the goals that we had for documentation.
So what was it like when you first joined the bank? You called up, you're going to call your buddy Mark, you find out the position that's available as Mark's position. You show up in that role. What was it like then? And then how did that change over the next couple years? And then how did that change over the next decade?
80% of all businesses fail within 5 years, according to the US Census Bureau. With so many roles and responsibilities that must be managed and have nothing to do with appraisal reports, is it any surprise that it's hard to keep up, much less having a sense of peace, stability, and profitability that comes from growing your business? Given all of this, you might already be thinking about exiting your business one day. Don't miss the limited opportunity to work with Michael, a real estate expert and professional coach. He has worked with more than 300 owners and entrepreneurs to find their highest and best use by solving problems that reach their most important goals. Compress decades of learning into days by working with Michael. Michael is famous in real estate and business coaching. With his help, you can accelerate your growth, increase your quality of life, and earn more money, all while ultimately doing less. Michael helps you not just grow your business, but also find new purpose in it and in your life. If you're ready to take control instead of being controlled, contact him on LinkedIn or email him at michaelh@ppahru.com.
Well, in the world of banking, especially depending upon the banking culture you come to find, you might find you have to read the tea leaves and understand both the technical skills and the social skills that you need to operate, and the ability to put a sharp view of what kind of people you're dealing with and how they're going to expect you. You can't be too aggressive. You can't be too passive. You have to find a way to handle people. And then there's always the constant evolving culture anyway, as the bank grows and as new people come in and as senior managers who you've come to know leave after timing out and going into retirement. So you're constantly seeing all these cultural waves that you have to learn to surf. And after 27 years, I said, maybe it's time to go. So I've been there a long time. The culture changes were yet another layer, and I was like, I'm getting tired of this. And I had done some interesting work in the world of validation, and there was a sense that we could maybe move that into a space for the banking community, which is still out there, that needs to be done. Banks are hiring staff to write internal documents to protect the bank's safety and soundness ratings for all these loan renewals. And for every new loan the bank makes, it's probably making 1 to 2 new loans. So it's generally growing its volume over time of loans. And all of those, unlike residential mortgages, all of those are under anywhere from a 1-year to a 5-year time horizon in which they will then be renewed, or you tell the customer to get lost and the customer has to go find a new lender. But every time you have this decision moment of how's the customer look, it's also, and by the way, is our collateral okay? We don't need to know exactly what it's worth, but we don't want to know it's worth less.
Yes.
And then the trick is, how do you do that without compromising your legality? Now, remember, most of the states in the United States do not require bank staffs to be licensed. Vast majority do not require staffers to be licensed. And the attorney generals of the states will interpret that as, if you don't have to be licensed, we're not going to hold you to a standard, even if you are licensed. And how do I know this? Julie, who's a good friend, Julie Mollendorp, who's a good friend, who I hired into the bank, came to work for me some years after I came to the Appraiser Commission in Missouri and said, look, my bank is chartered here in Missouri. I got a staff of probably 5 designated and or certified appraisers, and they are afraid to write reviews or any other documentation without attaching a FBI or a uniform standards compliant certification at the very least. And I said, I need to know from you guys how this runs. And the AG, without even missing a beat, said, you're fine. You don't need to do any of that stuff. You're done. Whatever you're doing is fine because you're an employee of the bank and your certification is not going to matter because we don't require licensing for your role. And that was it. And that's where it is in most of the AGs in the country. So just keep that in mind. And that's what's made Julie say, if I ever leave whatever I'm doing, I'm not going to come over and talk to Doug about it. And she did. And that led to me knowing Julie. And then she left the bank and she went to work with 𝗵𝘁. And that's where the recording came from about competitive restorative value.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. It's like a constant stream of change. There it goes.
Wow. That is good, Doug. That is really good.
It's just craziness. I'm just babbling here, so you can shut me up anytime.
No, that's phenomenal. So between we go back to the timing of TARP funding and that change in banking. You were there for nearly 3 decades.
Yeah.
You saw some significant changes
yes.
in the banking industry and the lending market. Things that people take for granted today didn't always exist or did not operate then as they do now.
No, and they're changing again. By the way, shameless self-promotion, Delta Real Estate Analytics, that's my company. This is my coffee mug. My daughter got it for me.
I love that.
He loves me. But you're right, it has changed. And I think we're seeing another tectonic shift right now. Now, right now we're in a very different regulatory space with the Trump administration. And it's a very conservative Republican approach to some things. And they have given tremendous power to the GSEs, the government-sponsored entities in the residential space, to do a lot of things. And I'm sure many of your residential listeners are very well aware of the collateral evaluation processes, the ACE, the automated collateral evaluation process that has taken away a great many of the jobs that were once ordered to appraisers. And that process is built on the very data that the appraisers have been feeding Fannie and Freddie for the last 15 years. And that's all automated. It's all data streamed. And Fannie and Freddie and the government-sponsored entities through the Federal Housing Finance Administration know more about housing than anybody. It's the most perfect data set on earth because it was made perfect by the appraisers who did the hard lifting of getting good measurements, good readings of bedrooms, bathrooms, and kitchens, total room counts, above grade and below grade areas, condition ratings, utility ratings. It is the most perfect data set. And I should make the point that in a given year, they're probably getting anywhere from 5 million appraisals or 5 million transactions to 10 million transactions in a given year over the last 15-something years. And their data set is enormous. There's only about 100,000 houses to start with in the country. 100 million, I'm sorry. So stop and think. They're not getting just one set of data on that particular address. They're getting 2 and 3 and 4 of those. So it's impressive what's happening. Very impressive.
Yep.
I'll bring back to an issue on restorative competitive value for a moment. I've met the lady and talked to her, who is the data scientist for the Federal Housing Finance Administration.
Oh, okay.
And she can't reveal a lot, but I will say this. Danny Wiley, 2 to 3 years ago, working for Fannie or Freddie. I think he works for Freddie.
One of the agencies, it's Freddie.
Yeah. But Danny published a report about racial bias or potential racial bias in the appraisal community,
Yep.
not as a proof of it, but as a odd fact, which was they have enough data in that data set that not only do they know which houses have been appraised, but which appraisers appraised those houses and whether those houses are in minority neighborhoods, minority Latino, or white majority neighborhoods. They can tell all these things. And they said, we found 1,200 appraisers that have been actively appraising in either white and black neighborhoods, white and Latin neighborhoods, or white, black, and Latin neighborhoods. And we can see how far, on average, they were going from the subject to the comp.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And that data identified that, roughly speaking here, in white neighborhoods, the average appraiser is going 1.5 miles. And in minority, black, or Latino neighborhoods, they're going half that far.
Wow.
Which means, to get back to a point about restorative competitive value, the concept is if you're appraising in difficult neighborhoods and you're only going half as far as you would in non-minority neighborhoods, you're probably going to have very difficult values because you're getting dead values from dead neighborhoods. And that's a really important thing to ponder that we have to think about, which is why RCV came into being. The concept of why do we have to stay to those neighborhoods? Why can't we look outside those neighborhoods as a secondary method? Seems reasonable to me. And after all, the definition of market value is a competitive neighborhood, competitively active. If these aren't competitively active, shouldn't you be trying to find sales from competitively active markets?
Fascinating question.
I think it.
Do you find that that is only applicable in residential properties, given that your background in most of your career is commercial?
No. In fact, so as I mentioned to you already, I'll just put my little fingers in here. See, there's a triangle.
Well, in that triangle, I see it right there.
See the triangle. The triangle has to look at 3 different features of a comp. How physically similar it is, how locationally similar it is, and how recent it was. The perfect comp for any property is the property that is exactly like you in size, age, condition, quality. It's next door, and it sold yesterday.
That's perfect. It's the perfect comp that we all look for when the underwriter reaches out to us and says, don't you have a better one?
Correct. Now, what I would recommend we start talking about in our business is the concept of rating. Let's use a 1 to 5 scale. How good is it at location? 5 means it's perfect. It's next door. 1 means it's way far away.
Yeah.
Or we look at physical features. It's exactly like us, built by the same industrial developer, same size, and that's a 5. Or maybe it's an older building or whatever, and then closeness. Look, if we're and then scale them that you get a total comp score for all these features.
Got it.
And then you pick the best comp scores. That might mean I got a really good one close by, a really close by sale, but it's not a perfect sale, but I want to use it because it's so close by. But I have a justification for going way the heck out of town. If I'm dealing with a 500,000 square foot industrial plant, which I've done, I might scale my search 200 miles, 250 miles, from here to Chicago, down to Memphis, down to mid-Mississippi, over to Kansas, over to Ohio. Heck yeah. If I got to find how many 500,000 square foot plants are there that have sold?
Yeah.
Get the drift? You have to have a methodology for why you stretch. So it's an interesting idea.
That's a great point. It's a fascinating thing because, again, when you go back through how much banking has changed, how much lending has changed over the 30 years you've been there, people like yourself that came in with family or professionals that were guiding them from the middle of the prior century versus late in that century. Now we're obviously
phone a comp. You know what I said?
exactly.
Phone a friend for a comp. I heard that even in my 20s. I said, "You're kidding me, really?"
Yeah.
Really?
No, that totally makes sense. What were the biggest changes from your perspective as an executive at the bank, overseeing its loan health and asset growth?
My bank has never been an aggressive growth bank. It never has.
Yeah.
It has. Some stock analysts have often called it the platinum turtle because
Platinum turtle.
the platinum turtle. It's a just terrific quality, slow growing, and not a great. Stock price doesn't go taken off into the stratosphere at all. Culturally, human institutions are going to have the same problem of any, no matter what sector of the economy or the government it's in. You're dealing with constant new people. You face new cultural inputs, new political perspectives.
Yes.
New fads or waves of movement through that DEI, learning how to be a better listener, knowing how to avoid those things. So that's what you do. You recognize and try to ride the wave. And I'm a skunk. I got tired of all that soft stuff. I'm just teasing.
I appreciate your openness. That's the one thing we're here on the podcast. We don't throw a lot of stones,
man.
We just call it like you see it. Sometimes we chuckle, sometimes we cringe, but that's a place for people to share what their reflection is on the experience, because you're the only one who is living it. We're just along for the ride.
I was very grateful for the opportunity, and I had good managers who gave me a lot of latitude to be creative. And that's really where the music part came in, as I've like to say, I was vastly more creative in what I was doing in the world of dreary banking and appraising than I would have ever been as a performing pianist, which is just simply a human tape recorder replaying 300-year-old music.
Yeah.
It's not like you're going to go do a riff on a Bach piece. That doesn't happen.
I don't know. Anything's possible these days with AI and music and possibilities.
It is amazing what kind of stuff you can get away with. And there are some very gifted pianists, and I studied with one and two. It's still a very narrow gap in the world of serious music where you're not expected to go running off the rails at stuff.
That's true. That's true.
It's considered much more restrictive. In the world of what we do, especially what I've done, just go out there and throw mud against the wall and see what sticks, kind of thing.
Oh, wow. Given that your reference was the bank being a platinum turtle, does that mean its lending standards changed very little over the nearly 3 decades that you were there?
I would say that's very true. Now, what was helpful, though, was to give them what they didn't have before was a centralized system to have a unified approach to underwriting the collateral side. They had a tremendously unified approach to underwriting the customers, which is one of the reasons it was so safe a bank. Like I said, when everything else was going to hell in 2007 and 2008, and I was there to said, it wasn't hitting my institution anywhere near as badly as it was hitting many other institutions. And we had money to lend in 2009 and 10 and 11, where a lot of institutions couldn't compete because they didn't have cash, because they had their institutions shackled by strict oversight.
Yep.
So that's a factor there, right? So that's how that would play.
No, I totally hear you on that one. And then for those that have not been on the lending side of the equation, what is it that goes on over there? Because most of the people in the profession and the listeners of the podcast are on this side of the of the river, not on that side of the river.
All right. So let me bring you across, but remember, I'm the scorpion.
You were the frog.
And you're the frog, and you want me to go across, you want to ride my back, and I'm riding your back, but remember, exactly. I sting. So I'm going to sting you before you get to the edge, and I just hop off. No. The concept here is it's still very much a human function. So to understand appraising or environmental underwriting, which I ran both, to understand these features in the world of banking is to understand you are part of a group the tribe known as the Skinners. There are hunters and skinners. The hunters go out and bag the deal. They get out there and they fight with other bankers to secure the loan for this bank, which makes the money come into this bank, not the other. But they've got the carcass. Now, what do they do with it? They throw it in the cave for us skinners to see if we can make the carcass work for whatever's being proposed.
Yes.
That's the job. First off, we have to have a pretty good sense of, is this good quality collateral, weak collateral, where its strengths, weaknesses in terms of its ability to function as collateral. Is it an easily marketable, remarketable property, or is it a rare bird?
Yeah.
We don't, as appraisers, often think about the distribution of property types and classes and available data points for everything. If you think about this for a second, in any region, about 75% of your parcel numbers in any given county in the country, outside of rural areas, are going to be residential class-coded properties, houses, apartments, whatever. Which means even though there's an enormous variety of age, size, features, amenities, qualities, conditions, all that stuff, they all have three things in common. They all have bedrooms, bathrooms, and kitchens, which is a highly homogeneous thread that binds them together. But then you get to the non-resi. You're talking about the other, let's say, now like in an urban county like St. Louis, 75% resi, 25 to 20% is commercial, and the other 5% is institutional, non-for-profit, churches, whatever. What we would call, what's the word they use for no taxes paid? I can't remember at the moment. It's gone from my brain.
Exempt?
Exempt. Thank you. Yes. Except for an arcane thing called the Franciscan tertiary rule, which is, what the hell is that, right? But that's non-for-profit property being used for profitable rental. But the deal is that in that 20% is everything from warehouses to retail to office to this to that to boom to ag to going concern properties, hotels. And all of them are like wildly different from each other in terms of the way they're designed, the way what market they function, how they make their money, and so on. So in those spaces, you've got a huge amount of chaos and relatively few sales. So the first thing you have to understand is what makes a good property or bad property, ease of remarketing the property in the event you'd ever have to take it back. And then you talk about what's the most likely value it will have. And you can get an appraisal to do that, or if it's below the thresholds that are allowed by law, $500,000 for houses, $500,000 for business property. $1 million for $500,000 for investment property, $1 million for business property, meaning it's owner-occupied business property.
Yes.
They may have a lease, the least of your problems, I like to say, but they have a lease to themselves for tax purposes, for liability purposes. But you have to understand those kinds of nuances so that you can understand the proper classification. And then you got to figure out what it's worth. And the vast majority of the stuff that I touched day to day got involved with was stuff that would not actually ever need an appraisal. It could be done internally with an evaluation. And so we had developed a system to do those evaluations. And the biggest area for need in a bank is the issue of validation. You've got a loan, and every banker I talk to rolls their eyes like, yeah, that just drives us crazy. We got all these loan renewals we got to touch every day, and we have to do something to determine whether we can continue to live with the existing documents. Now, that's an important turn of phrase here. You notice I didn't say value.
Yes.
Documents. The document contains a value, but it's the document that you have to say, I can live with this document. Now, the regulators could get a little cleaner on it, but clearly the goal they have is to focus on, if you've got a document, that document contains a value. If you can say that document remains relatively reliable for your needs today, you don't need to get a new document.
Yes.
And there are things we could do as appraisers that come right up to the edge of USPAP compliance. I would advise you to look at AO21 if you want to get there, about other services provided as an appraiser. You don't even have to sign a certification. It's so very important. And I have built a product called Validation, which basically helps you prove up that very issue, how you validate the ongoing reliability of an existing appraisal on file without revaluing it. How do you do that? There's a series of techniques.
Yep.
I'm a little crazy. So that gives you a sense of how it's very different between the two worlds. The world of an outside consultant coming in versus the world of being on the inside, man. Yeah. You're a lifer, dude. And you're trying to figure out how to make it work.
Oh my gosh, that is something else. You're a lifer.
Whatever.
Oh my gosh, that's phenomenal. That is phenomenal. Doug, given everything, you're definitely on the crazy side. You did tie that back in, which we had addressed a little earlier. And anyone who's ever taken on a commercial loan has experienced this. Anyone who's had a home and done a refinance has experienced this as well. If you just do a rate and term, either renewal, as it would be in commercial, or unfortunately in residential refinance, you've continued to herald the position that the industry is doing it all wrong, and they're creating much ado about nothing in terms of the generation of paperwork, which otherwise is substantially unnecessary. Because when I bought my first 8-flat, I paid, I don't know, it was like $556,000. I put 20% down. And 5 years later, I had to go through the whole rigmarole again to them to paper the file and pay for an appraisal. And I was like, look, my rents have gone up, my value's gone up, my expense ratio's improved. And what do you need an appraisal for?
You're exactly right. And in fact, I'll make a point here. I was doing 2 points. Point number one, if you ever have a chance again to see Schindler's List, there's a scene. Now, why am I referencing such an odd reference here? But there's a scene near the end of the movie where Oskar Schindler, played by Liam Neeson, is talking to I can't remember the character's name, played by Ben Kingsley, but he's Schindler is making money hand over fist, and he's bored. And the guy who really runs the firm for him is this Jewish business manager from whom the company was stolen, and Yitzhak Stern. And so Yitzhak Stern is sitting there talking, giving him the quarterly report. Schindler's just kind of yawning. Okay, whatever. He says, stop.
Yep.
Am I making more money this month than I made last month? Yeah. Am I going to make more money next month than I made this month? Yeah. Is there any reason that this will change? The war could end? And that was the line. And that's the point you just brought up, Mike.
Yeah.
So that's point one. Point two, I was doing an appraisal of an apartment building by a guy who used to be a banker and was now a broker. He made the point that when you are going and getting a new title report,
Yep.
updating a title, the title company may insure over the existing title documents. And
Absolutely.
you know that term.
Oh, yes.
Rather than rebuild the title from scratch,
Absolutely.
you just make an educated
ensure
risk.
the gap. You're just you're reviewing and ensuring the gap between the most recent work they did and the next period.
Precisely. So why can't we do that in the valuation space? And this is a space that has been largely populated by internal staffers who may or may not have appropriate independence of function. And if you're talking to banks, they would much rather figure out a way to hire you out and pay a fee to you that's as long as it's within a reasonable range that you're not going to scream, the customer won't scream at the closing of the renewal.
Yeah.
This is just a documentary fee to them, that you could do that for them and they don't have to have all this, because they have to pay a person, they have to have a seat for that person, they have to pay benefits, vacation time, contribute to a 401k, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot of fixed costs.
Significant fixed cost.
And if you could be doing this, then rather than have them do all that, and you certainly don't want the lenders to be doing it because that's a real violation of potential independence, let me take that risk on for you. Now, the problem is how do we do that in a way that doesn't involve appraisal activity?
Yes.
There is a way. There is a solution.
That is the
AO21 is a place where you can see it. But you have to know how to read AO21 and do it. But it's doable.
Yep. That is a fantastic segue. So what are you looking forward to over the next 3 to 5 years, Doug?
I'd like to retire one of these days. I've been at this for 45, 46 years. I'd like to work another 5 years roughly.
Yeah, of course.
But at that point, in terms of where I see the market going, I think we're going to have another hard landing somewhere. I think we're in the incipient moments of it right now with the oil crisis that we've. And I will make a point. What we really ought to be looking at is the danger to the petrodollar.
Yep.
And there's only a number of people who are talking about the petrodollar risk to the economy, and that the dethroning of the U.S. dollar as the global default currency for trades and exchanges.
Yes.
Up against the Chinese yuan, renminbi.
Yep.
Those are significant threats to the ability of the United States to continue to fund its massive deficits, which is also another huge issue for the country. Massive issue. And let's not forget, in 2000, we were within 2 years, 3 years at the most, of paying the entire debt off. In 2000, at the change of administrations, we were almost at the point where the deficit would be erased entirely.
Yes.
Not just the deficit spending, the debt burden. So that's a concern. So I think we're going to see some hard times, which means the role of competent consultants is very important here.
Very important.
And being able to look over the horizon a little bit to say what we see. At least to say, hey, I have my ear to the ground and I'm hearing thunder hoofbeats of buffalo coming. Something big is coming. Even that would be a useful lesson for us. But then again, I'm like a lemur. I'm always looking for the next evil, dangerous thing that's going to sting me. That's my natural state of being. Dangers everywhere, Will Robinson.
Doug, that's what makes the industry unique, is that different people have different outlooks.
They do.
And somewhere amongst the extremes, there's something that's probably more efficient, more effective, and
I agree.
Something that to some degree or another, people can embrace. And I always appreciate that you're always looking out to help advance and evolve the profession, as opposed to just sit back and watch it become more stale and more stagnant, as so many people, sadly, in positions of leadership have done.
This a cultural sclerosis that happens with lots of things, and it's difficult to find pathways forward when you're deep in the woods, and it's really hard to see things, how to punch through and find the light. Very tough. Very tough.
Totally agree with you on that one. Totally agree with you on that one. Doug, as always, it's wonderful to spend an hour together and share a little bit about your perspective. And shame on me, I should have had you queued up to close us out with the little piano concerto, but
I don't. My piano's across the room here from me. I sit in a small office in the back of my house. That's very pleasant here, but it is. I have lots of creaky, rusty fingers these days.
I got it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Doug, it's always a pleasure. And friends, thanks for joining us for another episode of Perusings, the Appraisers on Purpose podcast. And lots to take away, a number of interesting opportunities ahead. And as you saw Doug with his gear, Doug, if people want to reach out to you, how do they find you?
I'm sorry, say again?
If people want to reach out to you, how do they get connected to you, Doug?
I would invite you to send me an email. Look up my website, www.delta-real.com. And you can write me an email at dougpots@delta-real.com. And you can always drop me a line and we can have a conversation.
Fantastic. Doug,
Awesome.
Thanks again for joining the podcast.
All right. Take care, Mike.
All right.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of 𝗶𝘀𝘁, Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of 𝗶𝘀𝘁, Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.